Hello, everyone. This is Stephanie Boozer with CUGC HQ. Welcome to today's Connect webinar with Tenzig. Going to be talking about the latest virtual apps technologies that you can leverage in Citrix Workspace for Linux. This is Tenzig's first webinar with CUGC, so I am excited to get us going today. But before we jump into that, I just want to alert you to a few CUGC events that we have coming up. Here's our event calendar. You can see that we've got our local groups are still meeting, even though we can't meet in person, we're meeting online. And actually today our Indianapolis group is meeting at 3 o'clock. So if you're part of that group, or even if you're not, feel free to join in the fun. There is a link in the chat already for you to check out our events and upcoming webinars, so definitely do that. And next month, we have our day-long Excel event. That's our Great Lakes Excel. And if you may or may not recall, we have these day-long events. They're usually in person. We pull multiple local groups together. It's a day of speakers and great networking, prizes, great food normally. We obviously can't pull off the food part virtually the same way, but we are putting together our Excel events online. So I hope that you'll be able to attend one of those. And we do have a calendar of those on the website for you. So check those out. Just a couple of housekeeping details for you today. We are recording the session, so you will get a recording link tomorrow. That is going to come to you in an email from GoToWebinar, so just be on the lookout for that. Also, we'd like for you to submit your questions at any time. We're going to save all of the questions for the end of the presentation just so we can keep things moving, but I do want you to type them in as you have them just so you don't forget them. So type those in anytime. Also, towards the end, I will be submitting a link to a survey. It's short and anonymous, and it's just for CUGC use only. We just like to get your feedback on all of our webinars, so be on the lookout for that as well. All right, so I know you're going to have a lot of questions for us today, so I have help to keep track of all those questions. And Yanni Cahonen is here to help me with that today. He is a Citrix technology advocate, and he's going to be looking after all those questions. Yanni, would you like to say hello to everyone?
Hello, everyone.
Short and sweet. So yes, Yanni is going to take care of all the questions, so do type those in for us, and he'll keep an eye on those. And without further ado, from Tenzig, we have their CTO, Kevin Greenway, and I am going to hand things over into his capable hands. So Kevin, I am sending the screen to you right now, and you should be getting the request to share.
Yeah, thanks, Stephanie. I got it, and hopefully everybody can see my screen.
Yep, I can see it.
So yeah, thanks for the intro, Stephanie, and welcome everybody to this webinar. I hope you enjoy it, and I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day, depending on which location you're joining from, and whether it's morning, afternoon, or even evening. So Stephanie said, I'm Kevin Greenway. I work for Tenzig, and I'm the CTO here. And I've been with Tenzig now for 8 years, and experiencing Citrix amongst other EUC and VDI products. Just another one bit of housekeeping. We're going to be doing some polls throughout the webinar just to sort of gauge our audience and just to sort of get a bit of interaction going. So Stephanie will be putting those polls throughout. So really appreciate your feedback there again, just to sort of gauge our audience throughout. So I'll kick off. So the first slide is actually from Citrix Ready, or the first 3 slides rather, and they were from a recent webinar that we actually did with Citrix Ready, and I thought that these 3 slides specifically were worthy to shout out, as they include some important and recent changes to this particular program, which Tenzig are a proud partner of. So the Citrix Ready Workspace Endpoint program introduces some key changes as part of Citrix Workspace App, which, as probably most of you know, replaces the Citrix receiver before it. And historically, there were 3 Citrix Ready levels that an endpoint provider such as Tenzig could achieve. And these were there to facilitate different use cases and different worker types. Typically, the base level of Citrix Ready was aimed at task workers with mostly server rendered features and single monitor usage as an example. Then Citrix Premium, which facilitated sort of knowledge worker usage, which included features such as multi-monitor and HDX client rendered features like HDX media redirection and Skype for Business optimization pack. And then the third and final tier was specifically aimed at HDX 3D Pro use cases for NVIDIA grid deployments, typically for power users and graphic design and 3D CAD and so on. So these have now been updated and consolidated into effectively 2 levels, Citrix Ready Endpoint Standard level and Citrix Ready Endpoint Premium level. And as we'll see on the next 2 slides, standard levels, as you can see, is still mostly server rendered features, and it's really aimed at a lower cost, lower powered endpoint. And this does, however, now also include features such as the Skype for Business optimization pack, but at a lower webcam encoding rate than the premium equivalent. And additionally, as you can see with the premium verification, again, you've got the HDX client features there, such as bidirectional audio, real-time web compression, and significantly the new one, which is the optimization for Microsoft Teams. So these are very critical features currently with a much higher dependency, as we're seeing for sure, in terms of things like VoIP and collaboration requirements due to a significant increase in remote working due to the COVID-19 situation. And on this final slide from Citrix Ready, we see that HDX 3D Pro features have now been extended to both standard and premium levels. So the premium features support new features such as BCR or browser content redirection, and as we'll see later, and also H.265 decoding graphics, which is reserved for more recently introduced hardware. So typically anything manufactured from 2011 or later. And Tenzig is an example, with the first thin client vendor to offer something that offered H.265 and was on the Citrix Ready approved list there. So as we'll see, Tenzig offer a range of endpoints to fulfill both of these Citrix Ready certifications. And I encourage you to use the Citrix Ready Marketplace for selecting the appropriate endpoint based on these requirements that you've seen on the 2 slides. So moving on, just want to give a quick background on Tenzig for those who are not aware. We're solely focused as a thin and zero client vendor, and we are specialized in Citrix amongst other VDI and EUC products. Our company motto is that we make our product fit your environment and not the other way around. And obviously this is more critical than ever in such a fast-paced and changing environment. We're headquartered in Phoenix, Arizona, with offices in UK, where I'm based, and also Australia and Germany. And we work with value-added partners and distributors in EMEA and North America primarily. And we've been in business for 17 years. We originated in the IBM terminal emulation market, but we firmly focused the company to VDI and server-based computing in 2009, which is where we were effectively rebranded as Tenzig. So we want to just talk a little bit about how we work with Citrix. Some of it I've touched on already, that we are, of course, a Citrix Ready partner. And again, as part of that, we certify all of our endpoints on the Citrix Ready Marketplace. And where we're able to differ from our competitors is, again, we're solely focused. But not just that, our staff are all, both the sales and the technical teams, are skilled in Citrix through training and certification to take the sales and support to the next level. So we're effectively much more than just supporting the endpoint. We typically help our customers end to end, especially with some of the HDX features, again, some of which I'll cover on today. So as part of that, we're a front runner in many Citrix innovations. And again, as part of that, we were amongst the first to join the Citrix Ready Workspace Endpoint program. And we were amongst the first to offer support for Skype for Business optimization. And now Microsoft Teams optimization as well. And Stephanie, I think that brings us into the first poll question.
All right, let me get that ready for you. Okay.
So yeah, if you could just answer on whether you're planning to deploy Citrix Cloud or Citrix Virtual Apps or Desktops, and indeed if you've already deployed.
Looks like already is winning. Give you just
That's
a
good.
few more seconds. All right, so I'll close it out. 3, 2, 1. And we'll share those results. Can you see them, Kevin?
Yeah, I can see them. So yeah, that's great. So as we see, we've mostly already deployed with a few maybes, which hopefully gives us an opportunity to talk about the great features of Citrix, and then the no's, I guess, will it's people looking into see what Citrix can offer. So yeah, thanks for that, everybody, and we'll move on. So very quickly, just to discuss our Citrix Ready endpoints, we have a range of 0 clients plus thin clients based on Linux and Windows. All our endpoints are strictly Intel and AMD based, and as you can see, include a wide array of hardware options. So the varying display connectivity, USB-C, fiber, and PoE. So for a varying number of different sectors, and all of the Tenzig endpoints include our enterprise-free centralized management via the Tenzig Manager. We have a range of Teams optimized Citrix Ready endpoints, one of which is our 6000 Q series, which I'll be providing detail on during this webinar. And we do offer a flexible demo program for anybody wanting to trial our products in your Citrix environment. And at the end of the webinar, there'll be details of how to do that. So yeah, again, we do encourage that. And again, Stephanie, that brings in poll question number 2.
All right, there you go.
How's it looking?
It's looking like, well, it was shifting. So 50% still thin clients or 0 clients, and it's kind of split between planning and no.
Okay.
So I'll close it out now. It keeps shifting, but okay, I think I'm good. Now we've got straight even numbers. There you go.
Good. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Okay. So again, let's see if we can convince that that 20% and even the 30% with either planning to use or no. So so this slide's worthy to call out as well, really significantly at this time frame that we're all at. This is essentially, I guess, a slide that we've had for many years, but again, some of it is much more relevant today. So as part of this, we're clearly seeing a shift in demand now to office and home office usage, and an early trend we saw at the sort of start of the pandemic in the different regions and locations was an increased demand for mobile endpoints, including laptops. However, what we've found, both in terms of our own experience in the years gone by, but also actually direct feedback from our prospects and existing customers, is that some of the problems of laptops are the lack of deployment and ongoing management features that are kind of standard in a thin and 0 client. And similarly, whilst a laptop is ideal for working from sort of temporary locations such as kitchens and dining rooms, and for those that are I guess like me, where you have to mix work with the home schooling, that sort of location as well. So the idea behind a thin and 0 client is that it aesthetically fits better to a home office, permitting the same level of operation and functionality to employees as they get in the office, and importantly conforming with the health and safety measures. And we actually produced this content probably 3 or 4 weeks ago, but we're actually in the process of a video case study which should shortly go online with a a customer who came to Tenzig with Citrix, and they're a FTSE 100 company, and the sort of comment that they made by mixing, I guess, for their users laptops and Tenzig Thin clients, is that the Tenzig Thin clients, the employees remarked that it provides the office experience at home, which we thought was great. So that's definitely a takeaway that I want to instill, that they definitely have that place for more, I guess, more of a permanent fixture than maybe a laptop does. And again, there's some other relevant points here as well. So security is obviously an ever increasing concern. So zero trust security is often associated to BYOD type devices, and zero and thin clients, as previously mentioned, continue to be centrally managed and meeting security audits, which ultimately give enterprise assurance that the endpoints they use at remote unsecured locations have the same level of security and trust that they do when they're used in the office environment. And automated configuration and remote management is ever more essential. And again, that was part of the feedback. And again, that's made possible using the Tenzig Manager, where we can automate configuration, facilitate remote management to not just office-based endpoints, but also those that are based in remote home locations without VPNs and WANs, etc., using our cloud connector component. As we'll uncover later, another significant thing that we've seen in increase is unified comms and collaboration tools. So whilst we've seen an increase of that in the past 5 years, again, thanks to the likes of Skype for Business, there's been a much more exacerbated demand for that, again, with people working much more remotely and depending on those types of tools more than ever before. So we're seeing an increased number of these type of packs coming from such vendors for both Linux and Windows-based thin clients, and they basically are there to facilitate the desktop and the office-like experience for audio, video, and screen sharing. And then moving on to USB, for various verticals, there's a wide array of USB peripherals which are still in demand, and they require a high level of support and compatibility, which again is part of our ongoing development and partnership with various vendors, including for sectors such as healthcare, legal, and federal, and so on. So we see that it's really important to give the same level of peripheral support that you expect, again, from essentially a non-VDI or non-server-based computing deployment. And power consumptions come back. So power consumption has always been a historic gain of thin and zero clients in business to reduce carbon footprint. But again, with now people working from home, that can be much more efficient and effective by using a thin and zero client in a home location as well as the office. So again, it's this kind of a historic slide, but kind of more poignant than ever, really. And again, poll question 3 there, if you don't mind, please, Stephanie.
Yep, there it goes.
So I think this is an interesting one to hear the feedback from here with, again, what we have gained in the last 3 months since the COVID-19 situation kicked in.
No tablets so far.
Interesting.
Let's do a few more seconds. Lots of laptops.
Yeah.
All right, I'll close it out and share it. There you go.
Great. Yeah, that's good. That's good to see. And as part of that, we are doing some webinars through July and August to really focus on remote management. Those tools have always been available in the Tenzig Manager, but they're more poignant than ever. So again, if you are struggling with laptops in terms of management, etc., and you're looking for something more permanent, then again, I do encourage you to sign up to those as and when they're available. So we move on now to introduce our new hardware. It's the Tenzig 6048QC, and this features an Intel J4 105 quad-core CPU that has high burst capability up to 2.5 gigahertz and high-speed DDR4 RAM. And it's, I guess, ever important in, again, those offloading tasks that we talked about before, and the Citrix Ready Premium features, such as Teams optimization and browser content redirection, The other significant thing about this hardware is that it supports not just 4K, as we've seen hardware in the current generation, but also dual DisplayPort 4K and at 60 Hertz. And this hardware is already approved on the Citrix Ready Endpoint Premium level that I talked about earlier. And this hardware specifically is the first to feature our all new 64-bit operating system, which I'm really excited to talk about, is this brings some really key changes for Tenzig as a business. So the 64-bit operating system is a project that's some sort of 1 to 2 years in development, and the theme behind it was not just to support the latest hardware available, but also improve on what we had previously leveraged, and again the experience that we've gained during the time in business. So some of the challenges we faced of our previous operating system was the development time. So we wanted to be able to reduce that time as much as possible, again with the fact that the market, as we're seeing, is growing at an ever fast pace. We also had a challenge that historically we had to maintain a ton of libraries for legacy platforms, and we've kind of finally reached a point that we can now cross that over to leverage the best of new. And we wanted to align ourselves as closely to our partners such as Citrix when it comes to those new releases. So how could we make that much more seamless and speed up that process? And of course, security and vulnerability threats are ever on the increase. So what could we do to improve on this? The first thing that was paramount to that vision was better aligning ourselves as close to a standardized Ubuntu build as possible, because that's always a common denominator for Linux-based clients, such as the Citrix Workspace App for Linux and other plugins that sit around that. And again, minimizes the compatibility issues that you can face by having to either recompile or build that into your own environment. So the result of this, again, is all about saving time, both in terms of initial integration and development, but also reduction in the number of outside packages and dependencies which we have to customize to support that workspace app, and as importantly, that HDX feature set that I've talked about already. So we wanted to take the best of the previous operating system, which is our current zero client type architecture for Citrix, and that's been a great success to Tenzig, with the fact it includes a finely tuned Linux architecture for supporting Citrix Workspace App and Citrix Receiver before it, also things like a H.264 hardware decoder, and also coupled with things like our Launchpad and configuration apps and management agent. So it's really essential to retain those, and that's there to really provide users with a zero client user interface, which is as simple and clean interface as possible for authenticating and connecting to Citrix, and again, of course, providing a rigid and secure platform which can be easily deployed and managed using the Tenzig Manager. So with that, NOS 64 is derived from a core Ubuntu 18.04.2 LTS, which is short for long-term support. And with that, we include Linux 5.00 kernel, various built-in packages, which are based on Debian Buster. We also included the same but subtly changed front-end architecture for NOS 32, and some of that I'll touch on. And in addition, again, providing the secure and locked platform, which is centrally managed. We also ported over our H.264 hardware decoding for the Citrix high definition user experience. And again, with what we're seeing with an increased rate of higher resolution displays, we offered support for high DPI displays, but most importantly, really worked hard to reduce the amount of memory and storage footprint to maximize the endpoint performance. So whilst it was based on Ubuntu, it was essentially very finely trimmed and finely tuned for essentially a thin client type platform to work with Citrix. So in addition, we've introduced some key changes with, again, changes that we're starting to see in demand thanks to Citrix Workspace and Citrix Cloud. And I'll cover those in more detail on the next slide. The first formal firmware is 16.1.20, and this is included by default on that hardware, the 6048QC, as well as the other two mentioned there. And it's also available on request for other current Tenzig hardware. So if there's any customers on here that have existing Tenzig hardware that's in warranty, you can get access to that very shortly. So for anybody who subscribes to our tech and firmware notifications on the tenzig.com website, the notification, I believe, might have even gone out just before this webinar or in the process of. The self-service connectivity option, which I'm providing a demonstration on during the webinar, is also planned in the next forthcoming release. So we'll come on to that later. So what have we done? What have we done coupled with that to embrace the latest from Citrix Workspace and Citrix Cloud? And as we've really seen, Citrix Workspace and Citrix Cloud promote a new way of working and consuming essentially our workspace from the endpoint. So our experience historically is that with VDI, the Windows OS and desktop makes up the user's workspace. That's how the user consumes their apps, their activities, their email, and so forth. And a great deal of analysis and effort has gone into studying the time spent by average employees for searching for files and resources required to conduct their work, as much as 25% of an employee's work time. So significant, time wasted in terms of trying to find the right files for the right place and the right job. So Citrix Workspace is designed to put this information, as well as those same apps used to consume them, at the forefront of the user based on parameters like time, date, location. And those apps are now also extended to not just published on-premise apps as we've seen historically, but also SaaS, web apps, and even micro apps to effectively automate tasks for users. So things are essentially done via Citrix Workspace as opposed to a Windows desktop. That's the vision for the future. So whilst we recognize the reality is the Windows desktop and OS is here to stay for the foreseeable future from the viewpoint of a user's workspace, it's important for us to embrace what Citrix have done with regards to Citrix Workspace and allow users to access their resources locally at the endpoint, again, including those previously mentioned, such as those different types of apps. So this means we have to give the user much more local control of these resources from our endpoint, as opposed to just relying on remoting into the Windows desktop and navigating locally to the Windows desktop. So to that extent, we've integrated an all-new window manager, again, into the 64-bit build, which is really much better at allowing users to not just, again, consume desktops, but also different types of apps as well. And we've also added a new sidebar taskbar, which gives the users greater flexibility and control, again, if you're consuming those types of resources through Citrix Workspace. So just to summarize, the Tenzig endpoint is the optimal device for Citrix Workspace because of the Citrix Ready approval, the fact it gives assurance and meets the requirements of Citrix Workspace. It supports that wider array of HDX feature set that you essentially are buying into Citrix for, again, a couple of which we'll explore next. And the endpoint is optimized exclusively for that platform, and again can be centrally managed, making it ideal for both home and office. So again, Stephanie, if you could bring in poll question 4 for me, please.
Yep, there you go.
So yeah, I'm interested to see this one really, because again, we definitely are seeing almost a shift back. Historically, there was probably more usage of apps, then we went to desktops, and now we're starting to see a lot more interest back towards apps. So quite interested to see the results of this one.
It's heavy on both so far, but
it could be kind of in that crossroads of testing both, I guess.
Yep, so I'm going to close it out. Okay, and there you go. So yeah, biggest percentage on both.
Interesting. That's great. Thank you very much. So now I just want to spend a this slide talking about the latest with the Citrix Workspace app for Linux, which again we have integrated both. So again, this year's seen no doubt some real fast-paced releases of Citrix Workspace app, and again specifically we're talking about the Linux version here to keep track of the change in demands. So the April 2004 release saw significant features, including some improvements to log on and enumeration of resources for cloud-based deployments. And additionally, it was the first to introduce a level of optimization for Microsoft Teams, specifically supporting audio optimization at the endpoint to sort of follow trend with what came before it in the Citrix Workspace app for Windows version. In the forthcoming Citrix Workspace app 2006 release, which I believe is expected by the end of June, and already available as an EAR to subscribers of the EAR program, also supports, in addition to audio, video, and screen sharing. And we already have a number of mutual customers who are using this, they're testing it, they're using it, and we're working with Citrix in terms of providing that feedback. So again, if there is anybody interested in that, do reach out to us. So that brings us on to the Teams optimization, and I've covered that in multiple points already, but again, it is very, very relevant at this time. So this is a joint Microsoft and Citrix innovation to redirect RTSP or audio, video, and screen sharing via the endpoint when using the Teams desktop application in conjunction with Citrix virtual apps and desktops, either on-premise or with Citrix Cloud. So this optimization reduces latency and server-side overhead, improving user experience and hairpin type scenarios, which otherwise create a folding scenario between endpoints and virtual apps and desktops where optimization is not performed. As I said before, the Skype for Business optimization pack before it was hugely popular, and a substantial number of enterprises from really all verticals embraced jointly both Citrix and Skype for Business because it was their preferred platform. And as we've seen over the last year, there's definitely been a shift now towards those same enterprises shifting towards Microsoft Teams, and new deployments looking to embrace Microsoft Teams as well. So again, we're really excited with the timing of this to see how it can bring more customers towards Citrix and Microsoft Teams with that joint optimization. Back in April, I did run a joint webinar with Citrix, Rob Beekmans, and if you do have a deeper interest in this in terms of setting it up, debugging it, troubleshooting it, the recording is available on the Tenzig YouTube channel. The link is there on the slide. So yeah, it's an hour long and covers pretty much all of the elements for Teams optimization. In respect, again, I've mentioned this already, but the version supporting Teams optimization for NOS 64 or Linux, the 2004 version is included as standard, and the 2006 version is available on request. And that again is there to support video and screen sharing on top of audio. So that brings us to poll question 5, please, Stephanie.
All right, it's out there. I have to confess, I'd never heard of Cisco Jabber.
Okay, interesting.
Has not crossed my path yet.
There was a couple of others I would have liked to have got in there as well, but I think the poll questions were limited to 5, aren't they? So
Yeah,
hopefully
only
they'll
5.
cover in the other camp. But yeah, I think it's fair to say that we've had an unprecedented demand for, really each one of those.
All right. Yeah, there are quite a few other. Here, I'll close it out.
Okay.
And share the results.
Yeah. So kind of what I was expecting. If there is in the other camp, if you do have any specific requests, then by all means add the question in, and I'll try and cover those at the end. So this is really the final slide before I jump into the demonstration part. So browser content redirection, again, it's another heavily sought after HDX feature, and it's evolved and improved in recent times. And again, from my perspective, I think that it's a kind of paramount feature again with the remote work use cases, and I'll explain why in a moment. So it was incarnated out of HDX Flash redirection before it, when back in the day when YouTube and other sites were based, the video content was based on Flash. So the browser content redirection is a technique of redirecting, this time the browser viewport, within the virtual delivery agent on either the desktop or the app, so either Google Chrome or Internet Explorer, and that effectively gets redirected to the endpoint. So what happens is the user navigates to a site using their browser, and that URL request is then redirected to the endpoint, and the endpoint directly fetches and renders the content using its own local browser engine, and that content is overlaid seamlessly on either the virtual desktop or the app. So it gives the user the appearance that everything's happening sort of natively. And again, similar to Teams, the technique's there to reduce server-side overhead and bandwidth consumption in the virtual desktop or the virtual app, because of the fact that the endpoint is fetching and rendering it directly, to also improve in the user experience. So again, it makes a great remote working feature, since the fact that if you do allow users to go to the internet, again from their virtual desktop or from a controlled app, that again it goes to the outside world and doesn't have to be routed either to the data center, or for example if you're running desktops and apps in the cloud. So a really good feature. So earlier versions of it leveraged a browser engine on Linux endpoints, referred to as WebKit GTK. However, there were some performance issues with this, particularly on some of the more lower powered, older thin clients, and the more recent versions of the Workspace app for Linux, 1912 onwards specifically, now are shifting towards an experimental Chromium-based browser engine, which again Tenzig support. And so far, feedback is very good. The performance of it is very much like what we saw before with HDX Flash redirection. So really is a good step forwards. And I should also say that a lot of the focus here is on Linux, but of course that feature also applies to Citrix Workspace app for Windows. So we get to the demonstration part, probably running over a little bit in terms of time. So I'll try and shorten these demos down as much as I can. And I've had to improvise a little bit with the fact that, again, like everybody else, I'm working from home. So what I'm very, very quickly going to show you is the experience when you unbox a Tenzig. So again, similar to what you see on the hardware and the operating system that I've talked about during the slides. And it is important to say that this in reality is done through the Tenzig Manager. But let's say, for example, this is your first time you've contacted Tenzig Sales, you've taken a demo, and you haven't yet deployed the management tool, and you want to see how it interacts with Citrix. So first step is specifying the location. As I said before, I'm in the UK. That step essentially configures the keyboard, as well as, where applicable, the time zone. That'll do for now. So that sets obviously the time and date. And then the third and final step is specifying our connection into Citrix. So historically, this has been our default. It uses our kind of zero web browser to connect to Receiver for Web most recently, or also things like Citrix Cloud, or Citrix NetScaler, or even for legacy environments, Citrix Web Interface. We also have a web API, which gives much more granular control over both login and auto launching and control of different desktops and apps. So it provides a much more granular experience for sort of single sign-on. And then, as I touched on most recently, we've leveraged the self-service browser engine within the Workspace app. So again, I'll give a demonstration of that shortly. So let's say, for example, we use the web API. We essentially have to point it towards the Receiver for Web URL. And you probably won't get it if you're not from the UK, but we have something called a show called Blue Peter here, where this is basically something that I prepared earlier. So I'm not going to complete this part here. I'm just going to show you an example of the URL, and then switch to some other physical endpoints that I've sort of set up in the office to be able to provide a much more deeper demonstration. So essentially that's it. It's those 3 steps. When I click OK, that is the configuration complete. So let's now switch over to the other endpoints. And what I want to show you around this time, so this is running that self-service executable, and it's configured to communicate to Citrix Cloud. So you can see again how that experience looks if you're specifically using Citrix Cloud. So again, this is one that I've configured earlier. Now this is essentially the user's launchpad. So you can see it's very simple, very intuitive. We allow user-controlled applets here. So let's say, for example, like in this example, we want to allow our users to change their display topology. We want to allow them to specify their preferred audio device, but we want to prohibit them getting into the rest of the deeper configuration. So very, very simple and straightforward. And for example, we can turn on passwords in the security settings. We can allow those different user-based options here. If we go back to the settings that we were at previously and look into the Citrix settings, again, in this case, I'm connecting to Citrix Cloud. I can also configure specific options for the workspace connectivity, such as changing the self-service mode between windowed or full screen, as well as the desktops. So you can be very interactive with how you want the login experience to be. And then similarly, if not more powerful, with the web API and PN agent. So there's much more that we can do here with regards to, again, making the logon much more automated and simplistic for users. And advanced, so various different Citrix features. It's all about making this simple and very granular for both the administrators and users. Also want to touch on USB devices. So similarly with Citrix Studio, where you can manage your USB redirection both through classes and vids and PIDs, we can do that here as well. And also worth pointing out the sidebar and taskbar that I mentioned. So by default, it's turned off. So again, if you are looking to consume apps, you can turn that on here, and you can adjust the settings. So you can adjust the type, you can change the position of it, as well as other parameters. So once we turn that on, you can see the sidebar comes into view. And essentially, once we start to launch our apps, that's where those apps are placed in terms of giving us the user control. So once we click on login here, again, this should connect us towards Citrix Cloud. So it's using the Citrix Workspace engine. And then from there, we log in, and again, we're presented with our apps and desktops, etc., this time through Citrix Cloud. And there we go. So that's the experience that you would essentially get with using the self-service plugin with Citrix Cloud. The next part of the demo, I want to just demonstrate the Teams optimization and the browser content redirection, so that you can see the benefits of that, and then that should end the presentation. So this time, I'm connecting to our Citrix on-premise environment, where I have a desktop that has got both of those features enabled. So the first thing I'm going to do is log in. And the first thing I want to quickly show you is the policies that apply to both browser content redirection and Teams optimization in Citrix Studio. You'll have noticed the beta sign that came up before. A typical demo here. I'll show you another way. Let me bring something else into view. Okay, so if we open Citrix Studio, Again, I just want to show you quickly the policies that are associated to that. So for Teams, it's very simplistic. There is just one policy. It's the Teams policy. Come on, let the demo gods be with me. Helps if I actually put the cursor in focus. So we have the Teams redirection policy there. So the default for that is allowed in any case. There's also some settings that you have to enable in the VDA, such as using the relevant version of Teams application. And again, that's covered in much more deep dive on that webinar. So again, ensure that that particular policy for Teams is enabled. For browser content redirection, as far as policies, there are the 5 that you can see listed here. So firstly, the policy to either prohibit or allow it. And again, as you can see, it is allowed by default. And then you have an ACL configuration list. So this is the websites that you want to be redirected. So when the endpoint or the user goes to those websites, and as you can see, you can include wildcards here. They're the sites that are redirected to the endpoint. And then you can also include things like authentication sites. You can actually blacklist websites which override the ACL, and you can also support proxy configuration if you wanted to switch to a server fetch client render type model. So there's those 5 policy features there for browser content redirection. So this is signed us into that Windows 10 desktop that I mentioned. First thing I'm just going to do here is verify that we are running the optimized model. So you can see when I click on about and version, we are running in HDX optimized mode. So again, in that webinar and in the Citrix documentation, it does talk about the steps of how to verify that and troubleshoot that. And also, when we go to settings here, importantly, when we go to our devices, we can see that the cameras and the headset that's physically connected to that endpoint, which is actually at my office, which is dark and in the evening, you can see they've been passed through directly to the endpoint. Now, let's see if I can make a quick call to my own Teams account here at the home location. It would help if I actually sign into Teams. I closed it down at the start of the webinar. Give me a second. So that's Teams running. I'm going to minimize that because I hate having to see myself on camera, especially when it's very hot and humid here in the UK. But what I want to show here is that if we look at the load on the VM, you'll see that Teams as an executable is pretty much 0. Even if I bring it back on screen, it's pretty much 0. And if we turn our attention towards the endpoint, you'll notice the endpoint with the HDX Teams process is responsible for that webcam encode and also decode as well. So that shift is essentially moved. That shift has actually moved from the VDA to the endpoint. So I'll kill that call out. That's that. Then for the browser content redirection, if we start by opening Google Chrome, the first site I'm going to go to is my famous Daily Mail website. And again, I'll open Task Manager here. So if we go to Daily Mail, this is specifically a site that won't go through the browser content redirection, and we can see whether that's active or not by using this browser redirection extension here. So that's again something that you have to install for Google Chrome, and you install it through the Chrome Web Store. So it's the browser redirection extension, and that gets added into the Chrome browser. And then again, it uses that ACL configuration as we saw before to either continue to render it in the VDA or over to the endpoint. So this, again, this site, as you can see, is the browser extension is gray, which means it's idle. And this is always a good news site because of the fact it contains lots of different graphics and videos and video. And again, if we look at the performance of the VDA, you can see, even though that's now static, that there's quite a lot of load on the VDA. And again, equally, if I turn the attention towards the endpoint, all the endpoint's doing is very minimal processing overhead, which is largely the receiver or the workspace app, plus Zorg, which is the graphics, and then VNC, which is what I'm using to shadow the endpoint. However, if we go to YouTube, this is where you'll see now the browser extension has gone active, but hopefully what you'll also see is that the CPU load on the VDA and the VM remains at a much lower rate than when it did with the Daily Mail site, with the fact that, again, now the endpoint in the office is doing all of the work. So again, now if I shift and look towards the endpoint, we can see the web container process, which is the web engine that sits on the endpoint, is taking the bulk of the load. Now, as an average, that's looking around 30% CPU load on the endpoint, and that would increase, for example, if we blew that up into full screen. So again, hopefully that gives you a good example to finish off the demo of those two HDX techniques that are really shifting that load from the compute power, either in the cloud or on premise, towards the endpoint. So this is more significant if you're using cloud, with the fact that you're essentially paying for that compute power. So hopefully that demo paid off. And I think just bring back the slide back into view. And I think that finishes us off, Stephanie, at poll question 6, and gives us about 5 minutes for questions as well.
All right, there we go. Yep, and there are some questions, so I know Yanni's been looking at those.
Let's hope I can answer them all.
And I know that we had some people couldn't get to the polls. I don't know what was happening, but maybe I was running them pretty quick, but I know we wanted to get everything in today. So I'll go ahead and close this one out in 3, 2, 1. Here we go. All right. And yeah, you got quite a few want to hear back from you. I can share that information with you, Kevin, in the report afterwards.
That's great. Thank you. So yeah, so I hope everybody enjoyed that overview and also the demonstration. It mostly worked, with apart from one typical gremlin that likes to get in. So I guess we'll now hand over to Q&A, and there are contact details for anybody that would like to follow up afterwards as well. So over to you, Yanni.
Yes, we do have a couple of questions here, and first one goes, could you tell more about the warranty aspects?
Sure. So the warranty is 3 years as standard. It's an advanced exchange warranty, which means that we effectively replace the failed unit ahead of time. And that warranty can be extended to 5 years. And within that warranty, you have full access to Tenzig support. You get access to the firmware updates. The firmware updates can be either downloaded from the website or requested from our support team, and you can sign up to the notifications again on the tenzig.com website.
All right, and next question. We want to be able to manage Citrix team clients over the internet. Is this possible?
Yes. So if I'm understanding the question correctly, with the Teams optimization that resides in the Workspace app, we can where that's bundled into Tenzig clients, both Linux and Windows now, we can manage those over the internet using the Tenzig Manager. So we have a feature called the Cloud Connector. It's completely free, and then you can manage those endpoints over the internet as you would, again, in a traditional LAN or WAN or VPN environment. So if there's more detail required on any of those, again, we can reach out afterwards.
Okay, and next one. With work from home being more common these days, what bandwidth speed is required for an ideal at-home experience when connecting to a remote workplace?
It's quite a difficult question to answer actually, because the bandwidth really varies dependent on not just the use case, but also how the things like the graphics and the audio are configured, and that's really one of the great features of Citrix, the fact that you can tune those parameters really based again on the user requirements to make them either more rich or less rich dependent on the use case. And the bandwidth really honestly does very rarely a lot. You know, if you're looking at a very simple static screen like we have here, then you're looking at minimal data, you know, as in kilobytes, for example. But of course, if you start to consume busy spreadsheets and you're frantically scrolling through the worksheet, or you're scrolling through Outlook, or you're playing videos in YouTube, that bandwidth can jump quite significantly to several megabits. But again, the advantage of Citrix is that it can be tuned for a variety of different locations, and you have things like H.265 as well, as I mentioned before, which offer further significant reductions in bandwidth. So again, I think it's worth exploring those specific use cases in more detail to give a more defined answer there.
Okay, and another one, with browser content redirection, can you layer in security solutions such as Mimecast, which checks URLs for potential problems or dangers?
Sorry, can you repeat that one, Yanni?
With browser content redirection, can you layer in security solutions such as Mimecast, which checks URLs for potential problems?
Yeah, I haven't specifically used it in conjunction with Mimecast, but with what we saw in the policy options before, there is an option to route the traffic through a proxy type configuration. And I think there's even more recent developments from there to include things like pack files, so that the web traffic can be essentially routed through those types of servers for filtering, etc.
All right, and I think that's the last question. If planning to move to Citrix Workspace Cloud later, can we use these same endpoints for internal Citrix storefront on-premises connection?
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully, as you saw during the demo, there's the different connection types to offer a variety of support for both deployments. And I probably didn't cover it in the demo, but there is also the option of specifying multiple URLs. So for example, you can have the first URL which connects to the Citrix on-premise environment, and then the second URL which can be specified to connect to Citrix Cloud. So again, we can support both of those options.
Okay, and I just got a couple of more questions.
Okay.
How does this work with multi-factor authentication?
So with multi-factor authentication, that's typically, if it's things like RSA, they're typically part of the workflow of both the self-service plugin and also the Zero Web browser. So we recognize that as part of the workflow. There's also support for example, for smart card authentication, where we'd leverage something like the Web API or PN agent type connection. So yeah, hopefully that covers a couple of different examples of two-factor authentication.
Okay, and one more. I would like to hear about scalability of your management capability.
Okay, so in terms of scalability, we, in terms of things like jobs, in terms of doing firmware updates, in terms of doing configuration changes, we have controls and settings to limit the traffic to the Tenzing manager in terms of the amount of activity that we're generating on both the server where the Tenzing manager resides, as well as the number of jobs that we're executing across the network. And the components of the Tenzig Manager also allow us to deploy different components on different servers for improved scalability as well. So for example, you can break the cloud connector so that it resides on a separate machine, either in the DMZ or the internal network, and then the Tenzig Manager server database essentially resides on its own separate server as well. So hopefully, again, a couple of examples of scalability there.
Yeah, let's say like 1,000, 2,000, 10,000.
Yeah. So yeah, we have I guess our average sort of deployment with a single instance of the Tenzig Manager is typically in the range of 5 to 10,000 seats, and that's where we typically scale up to in terms of testing to that sort of level. I think it's important to say that the Tenzig Manager is certainly different from some of our other vendors, where the management tool, or the Tenzig Manager at least, isn't dependent on having to push out configuration files or policies every time the clients boot. We only ever do that during the initial configuration and where configuration changes are due. As an ongoing exercise, really the only traffic that we generate between the manager and the endpoints is, for example, notifications when the endpoints come online, when they go offline, obviously when we're shadowing the endpoints. So it's really, as an ongoing exercise, is really quite a minimal amount of activity and network traffic between the endpoints and the management tool. Again, much less than some of our other competitors.
Okay, thanks. That was the last one.
Thanks, Yanni, and thanks, Stephanie.
Yeah, I just have one last slide that I will share. Make sure you can see it. Yeah. And if you have any more questions, you can submit them at the last second, and I'll be able to capture them in the report, and I'll get them over to Kevin afterwards. But I just want to thank everyone for attending today. And if you did opt in at registration for a chance to win the Amazon gift card, we will randomly select the winner offline. I like to get the full report from GoToWebinar as soon as we're done. That way everybody has a fair chance. So we'll report that on Twitter. So make sure you follow us at MyCUGC. And also just make sure you stop by mycugc.org if you haven't been in a while. We've got some new blog posts up. There's forum threads out there. If you have a question, maybe you can help somebody out by answering one of their questions. Also, we have lots of stuff on our calendar, like I showed you earlier. So, you know, lots of ways for you to get connected, because now is a great time for all of us to stay connected since we can't get out and about as much as we used to. So definitely come and say hello online. And with that, I'm going to return everyone to your day. Thank you so much, Kevin, for your presentation and demo. Really appreciate it. And thank you, Yanni, for looking at the questions for us.
Thanks, Stephanie, and thanks everybody for attending. Hope you
Thank
enjoyed
you.
it.
All right, everyone, have a great rest of your day. I hope you stay happy and healthy and safe, and we will see you at another CUGC event again soon. Bye, everyone.
Bye.